Today I'm going to talk about a relocation technique based on the declination of your planets. Okay? Relocation is basically seeing which planets are going to be activated upon you going or being in any place on Earth. So if you're in New York, you'll have different planets activated than if you're in Florida. Okay? One of the neat, really easy ways and a simple way is to simply work with the declination of your planet. What's the declination? Well, here you've got planet Earth, okay? And the Earth has an equator and it spins on its axis. So here you have the equator, okay? And planets are moving through the zodiac here around Earth, okay? It appears like they're moving around Earth. So as the planets go through the zodiac, which is inclined to the Earth's equator by 23 degrees approximately, the planets will be either south of the equator or north of the equator. So this is north of the equator, this is south of the equator. And as those planets move north or south, or as they go through the zodiac, they'll be at all these different places. And they can be as far down as, 31 degrees south and up to about 31 degrees north approximately. Though it's really usually only the Moon and Pluto that usually will get that far north or south, okay? The Sun will get as far as 24 degrees, 23 something, 23.27 about. But the other planets, they can be here, but then also they can have a south latitude on the ecliptic, and therefore even be further than the bottom of the ecliptic. Because planets don't all move on this line of the ecliptic. Only the Sun moves right on this line. The other planets, one time Mars will be up here as he goes this way. Another time Mars might be here. That's the planet's latitude. That's its zodiacal latitude. What we're talking about, though, is measuring how far a planet is north or south of the equator. So if Mars is coming right here, it's this far south of the equator. If Mars, when he's here, still up here, he'll be this far north of the equator. Okay, so you get the idea. Planets are either a certain amount of degrees north or south of the equator, and that's called their declination. And it's one of what we call the equatorial coordinates, because it has to do with measuring the planets from the Earth's equator. And we use equatorial measurements for relocation in this technique because we're going to relate all those planets to the Earth. And it's the equator that defines the north-south degrees on Earth. Okay? So what we do is we simply are looking at how far a planet is north to south of that equator. Okay, so draw a bigger girth now. Here's our equator. So let's say a planet has a declination of 5.5 degrees. Let's say the Moon is 5.5 degrees north. And let's say Mars is 6 degrees south. That'll be shown in your software as a -6. So anytime you see a minus in your declination, that means it's south of the equator. And in Kala software, you'll find declinations on the upper right-hand corner of your screen where the planetary information is. One of those columns will be declination. For this technique, it doesn't matter whether the planet is minus or positive. So just take the number, the degrees, okay? And it'll be put out in degrees, minutes, and seconds always. So let's say a planet's at 5 degrees and 30 minutes. Okay? That means this planet is going to be strongest if you're in a city that has a 5 degrees and 30-minute latitude on Earth coordinates. So if you go to the city and look up its atlas, its longitude and latitude of that city, if that city's latitude is 5 degrees and 30 minutes, then your moon is going to become very prominent anytime you're in that city. Your moon will very much get activated, and you'll be involved in moon things. Okay? And if you happen to be at any city that's at 6 degrees, north or south, again, ignore the degrees. So if you're down in South America and a city that's in 5 degrees 30 minutes south latitude, you're still going to get moon. Okay? So don't worry about if it's minus or positive. Just take the number. And if you're at any city that's 6 degrees, you're going to get Mars, because that's what we decided Mars was for our hypothetical example here. And again, if you're at 6 degrees north, you're still going to get Mars. Okay, so that's the basis of the technique. The declination of the latitude of a planet equates to the latitude of Earth. North or south latitudes don't matter. Okay? Now you're going to see in your chart, some planets will have a very small declination, which means they're very close to the equator. And other planets can be way up here, like 28, like my moon is really high at 28 degrees and 33 minutes of declination. It's way up here. Okay? So, the planets that are closest to the equator are always going to be prominent in more places than planets that are further from the equator. And the reason that is because not only we just take the planet's declination, we also take multiples of that declination. So Mars is at 6 degrees. So any city that's at 6 latitude, Mars is going to be prominent in. 6 plus 6 is 12. So any planet that's at 12, any city at 12 degrees latitude, and that's whether north or south, we also can go to northern latitudes, are also going to vibe. Then 3 times 6 is 18. So any cities at 18 degrees of whether south or north latitudes are going to very strongly get influenced, have a Mars energy there. I mean, you'll get Mars things when you go to that city. Okay? So you have to take multiples of the declination, and then you can cover the whole globe, all the way to 90 degrees latitude. Okay? With the moon, it's at 5.5 degrees. So that means 5.5 times 2 is going to be 11 degrees. Though you'll get a strong moon. Then 11 plus 5.5 is 16 degrees and 30 minutes. You're going to have a strong moon. Add 5.5, we'll get 22 degrees. You'll get a strong moon. 22 plus 5.5 is 27, 30. So you have to take multiples of that declination to get all the latitudes on Earth that you may visit. Now, the thing about this is, because of that, if a planet's, say, at 1 degrees, multiples of 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which means no matter what city you're in, you're going to always be within 1 degree of that city. 1 degree of that planet, which is a strong proximity. So the planets that are closer to the latitudes are going to be planets that you're going to have an encounter with in every city you go to. They're going to be what's common about your life. That's not going to be a dramatic change. Okay, whether you go from one place to the other. If you go to a place, say you've got a planet, like I've got my moon up at 28 degrees. Okay, 28 degrees. It's really hot. Well, that means my moon's only going to get really strongly activated at 28 degrees, 56 degrees, and then 28 and 56, and 84 degrees. So there's only 3 latitudes, north and south, meaning a total of 6 latitudes, where my moon's going to get really strongly activated. Okay? So the chances of me living in a place where my moon really gets strongly activated is almost nothing. Okay? It's almost nothing. However, I also have my planet, let's see, Uranus, which is at 157. My Uranus is right here, 157, 1 degree 57 minutes. it's really close to the equator. So no matter what city I go to, I'm always going to be within 2 degrees maximum. And on average, about 59 and a half minutes, no, 58 and a half minutes away from being exact with Uranus. So pretty much any city I go to, I'll have a strong Uranus influence in my life. That's the constant factor. That's the norm that I'm always going to experience wherever I go. So those planets that are close to the equator, have less than 1 or 2 degrees of latitude, of declination, those planets are your bread and butter. Those are always going to be with you. You're always going to have those in your life. And so that's your norm. These planets that have a high south or north, that have a high number, when you move to those cities, that planet is going to define where you live. That planet's just going to really say, wow, this is just such a big difference. Okay? It's just such a big difference. For instance, my moon is in Capricorn. Okay? The one Capricorn place, the one time I lived in a place that was where my moon was right on it was right on the degree, was when I lived in Florida. Now, Capricorn rules swamps. Capricorn is alligators. And when I lived there, I lived on a swamp. Again, Florida is a swampy area, but there's some parts of Florida that are more swampy than other parts. I lived in a swamp. I had alligators in my backyard. When we went swimming in the lake, we looked to see if there was alligators in the lake first, and then we jumped in. When we went canoeing, we always saw an alligator. I mean, the moon in Capricorn rules alligators. In fact, the symbol for Capricorn in Vedic astrology, Makara, means crocodile. So Capricorn is symbolized by a crocodile, actually. So it was crocodiles or alligators, same thing, and swamps. Right there as a normal daily part of my life. I spent most of my time when I wasn't in school, I was either in the jungle or I was on the lake in the weeds. There was all this tall grass growing in the water, so we would be canoeing through all this deep grass. Okay? At the time I lived there, I was there between the age of 8.5 to 10.5. Those are the 2 years I lived there. And the moon became a huge part of my life because that planet is so far north. If I ever am in a city where that planet gets lit up, that planet's going to dominate my life in that area. Okay? All these other planets that are closer are going to be part of the life, but not the main thing. Okay? So the planets that have a high declination will impact things more strongly than the planets that have a low declination. But the planets with the low declination, you're going to have with you more often wherever you are. You understand? Okay? The other interesting thing, in my chart, and I'm using my chart because you're going to find it's such a pain to calculate all this stuff out, that I had it all calculated for my chart, and I didn't want to spend an hour or two doing the math for some other person's chart. So I'm going to embarrass myself and use my own chart here. Okay, my horoscope, my moon was also the Dara Karaka. Okay? Moon was always the Dara Karaka. And this is really embarrassing, really kind of funny, but I got to show it because it's all about astrology. The Dara Karaka represents your spouse, or in a man's chart, woman, and in a woman's chart, men, that they're attracted to. Well, when I lived in Florida, this really surprising thing happened, and what it was is that, the two hottest, coolest girls, even though we were only 8 and 5 to 10, but there was still already this big social structure, totally dug me. And they would always sit next to me, and they always wanted to hang out with me. And I wasn't in the cool, there was all these cool kids. I didn't hang with them. I was always sort of a nerdy guy that liked to do my own thing, and I wasn't a group person. I didn't try to fit in. Uranus, close to the ascendant, gets activated everywhere. Uranus was you know, 1.457 times 14 is just a shy bit short of Florida latitude where I live at 28. So Uranus was really strong, so of course I didn't care about fitting in. But it was a one time where, you know, the girls that everyone thought was really pretty and everyone wanted to get close to, because, gosh, I hate to say 10 and a half, was it 9 to 11? It's kind of embarrassing how quick those hormones get going. 9 to 11, but there was already a social order developing at that age in the school where, you know, there was kids who thought they were just the coolest kings of the class. And then there was people like me who didn't care. And then there was people who, you know, were getting picked on all the time. And I just kind of, you know, with Uranus being strong everywhere, didn't fit into any of those groups. Typical K2 in the first house person who doesn't fit into any social structure. And, but at this point, because my moon was activated, and, you know, these girls liked me, and I hung out with them, and I played with them. And, of course, it wasn't romantic. It wasn't anything like that. They were just my best friends at the school I went to. Was this girl. And that really pissed off these two other cool guys who thought they were like, you know, the gods in the class, and they actually had combs in their pockets where, you know, I never combed my hair when I was 11. And, you know, these guys were really focused on being cool, and everyone else kind of bowed down to their wishes. They always got the best seats, they always got the best chairs, and things like that. And this girl, these girls who were really attractive, and of course they kind of fell into those guys' niche, they still preferred hanging out with me more than those super cool kids. And I remember sitting there with those two girls on either side of me in our rows, and those two boys who thought they were the coolest, they'd be scowling at me because those girls were their friends too, and those girls were supposed to sit with them. Unfortunately, my moon, which was my Dara Karaka, was very active, and so as a result, the girls, prettiest girls in class, sat next to me. Okay. Now, if only I'd been older. When I moved from Florida, I moved to a place where, you know, my moon unfortunately was not getting lit up at all. So when a planet gets activated, it gets activated in the context of your chart. Okay? Meaning, my chart, the moon was in Capricorn, and the moon was my Dara Karaka. So that's what gets activated. To do any relocation technique, you have to study the planet and say, what is this planet in the chart? Moving to a new place just means this planet's getting activated in this place. It doesn't change that planet. It just means this planet is now awake and activated in your life. And it's your job as astrologer to say, what is that? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? If it's a bad thing, if that, say you've got a really bad planet, say you got a Saturn-Mars-Rahu conjunction in the 8th house, which is just a terrible accident awaiting to happen, and you go to a place where Mars and Saturn get activated, that's the place you're going to have your accident. Okay? And you're going to go to that place at the time that your dashas and transits move you to that place for you to have that bad accident. So you have to study the planet in the chart according to everything you learn in every other class. Relocation is just a way to see, oh, at that place, when I'm there, is a time where this planet will get activated for as long as I'm in that area. Okay? So those were enjoyable 2 years. I ran around the jungles, I went in my swamp, I had, my best friends were girls, and I spent my time in the jungle and on the lake. Oh yeah, and I had alligators for pets in my backyard, and we swam in the lake anyway. Okay? So, this is a great technique. So remember, the planets that have low latitudes, whether north or south, no matter where you are on the globe, you're going to get a very close vibe with those. But sometimes you'll get it really close, like, you know, you'll get it really exact. And when you calculate out these declinations, you always want to see what cities you get closest to, or what planets are the closest to the latitude of that city. And look at the closest as most important, and the second closest as second most important, and go from there. Okay? And the city to start with is your birth city. Start with your birth city and see where you were born, which planet was most active and most prominent according to these declinations. And then look and see, well, what planets shift, which ones become more prominent and which become less prominent when you move to your first place. And then see if you can see why you moved to that place based on your dashas and transits when you moved there. Did you go into a more Mercury place? Oh, and I was in Mercury period. Totally makes sense. And look for those connections so you can see how where you go to is, it has to do with the period you're in. So if someone is moving during Mercury period and they say, I can move to New York or Florida, you can do your relocation and see which city has Mercury as being more prominent. And then you can safely predict, I think it's going to be this city because Mercury is more prominent in this city. Okay? Alright, so that's the technique. Isn't that simple? It's such an easy technique. The secret is to remember that you have to understand the planet in the chart. The relocation just lets you see when I'm there, I'm at a time where that planet is getting activated. Now what is that planet in my chart? And then you can see what's being activated, whether a desirable or undesirable thing. And then the planets that have the highest declinations, when you'll rarely be in places where those planets really get activated, but when you are, they're going to be very prominent activations. And they'll define your stay in that location, more so than the planets that have really low latitudes, okay, or low declinations. Now to the fun part. I think in the 2014 version of Kala, right now I'm going to release the 2013 in about a month. Right now, what is it, April of 2013. For 2014, I'm hoping to build a relocation module where all the relocation techniques are all there on one screen. Until then, you're going to have to suffer and do it by hand. I don't know of a single software on planet Earth that does this calculation for you. I've always just done it by hand when I wanted to have fun with it. So, to calculate it, what you want to do is start by taking the degrees of your planets, the declination degrees of your planets, and converting those to a decimal. So for instance, okay, my chart, my sun, is at 3 degrees, 29 minutes, 34 seconds. Now, degrees, minutes, and seconds are a nightmare to work with mathematically. If I tell you to triple this, or double it, it gets really confusing, right? You know, because then you got 10 times 34 seconds, 10 times 29 minutes, 10 times 30 degrees. If I tell you to multiply it times 10, and the math becomes cumbersome. Got to get my calculator just a second. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is convert this to a decimal. Degrees and decimal. And again, don't worry if your planet has a minus or in front of it, which means a south declination. Just ignore the minus. So we want to see turn 29 minutes and 34 seconds into a fraction of degrees. So to do that, what we do is we take 34, which is the seconds, and we divide that by, actually I'm going to break it up into this, 3, 29, 34. We take the seconds and we divide it by 60. The first thing, take the seconds divided by 60. I get 0.566, and the 6 continues on forever. Then I want to add the 0.566 to the minutes. Plus 29 equals 29.5666. Okay? Now I've got the 3 degrees, 29.5666 minutes. And I've got rid of the seconds. I've converted those seconds into this decimal. Okay? Now I want to take 29.5666 minutes and take that into a decimal of degrees. To do that, I take the 29.5666 and I divide it by 60. And I get 0.492. So we're just going to say 0.49. That'll be accurate enough if you work it out to 2 decimal places. So my sun is at 3 degrees, 3.49 degrees, 3.49. So instead of working with a very cumbersome degrees, minute, second format of 329.34, I'm going to work with a very simple 3.49. Okay? For my sun. And say I want to move to a place, or I want to visit a place to see what it's like to have the sun in the 8th house as a prominent thing. Okay? Then I could take my city, and I can say I'll take the first place I was born, which was Fort Collins. But actually, it was at 35.07 degrees latitude. Okay? I have to convert Fort Collins to degrees, minutes, and seconds, to a decimal. 40 point what degrees? So I take 7 seconds, divide that by 60, and I get 0.116. I add that to the minutes, which is 35, and I get 35.1166 minutes. Divide that by 60 to get the decimal of those minutes, which is 0.58. And then Fort Collins was at 40 degrees, so I'm at 40.58 degrees. So now this is full degrees, degrees. Okay? So I want to see how close in degrees the sun comes out to Fort Collins. Well, 349, and I'll take multiples. 349 plus 349 plus 3.49 plus 3.49 plus 3.49, etc., until I get as close as I can to 40.58. So the easy way to do that, I'll go 3.49 into my calculator. And how many times? I think I'll go 3.10. 10 will be about 35. And then I'll do 2 more, times 12. 3.4, I'm just taking an educated guess here. 3.49 times 12 is 41.88. So that's the closest the sun's multiples are going to come to 40.58. And how much is that? Well, I can take 41.88 minus 40.58, which is the latitude of Fort Collins, and I get 1.3. Or 1.3. So my sun is 1.3 degrees away from Fort Collins, okay? And I would do that for all the planets, and then I would see which planet is closest and which planet is furthest away. Okay, that's how I calculate it. Or if I'm only concerned about the sun, I can do this same calculation for another city, and then I can see, if the sun is more active in one city or less active in another city. Okay? Pretty simple, right? That's the technique. It just takes a lot of math. Let's do another example. So my sun was 1.3 away from exact in Fort Collins where I was born. Where I live now, which is Prescott, I've got 34, 32, 24 is the latitude. So I got to convert that into a decimal. I'll take 24 divided by 60 equals 0.4. Add that 0.4 to the 32 minutes, plus 32 minutes equals 32.4 minutes. So this equals 32.4 minutes. Now I'll divide those minutes by 60 to get the decimal of the degrees. And I'll get 34 from there, 0.54. So 32.24 is 0.54 degrees. So 34.54 is where my current latitude is. Well, let's take that. That's an easy one. 3.49, the closest multiple will be 10 times, right? 3.49 times 10 equals 34.9. So now I can, how close is that? It's like right on it, right? And we can find out exactly by subtracting 34.54. Just 0.36 away. So where I currently live, I'm just 0.36 degrees, which is really, really close, from the exact sun latitude. Compare that to my birthplace of 1.3. And you can see I get a lot more sun here than I did in my birthplace. Okay? So sun things will be more prominent and be better for career success, right? It'll be a more stable environment. The sun always tries to create stability, right? So whatever. More solar influence in Prescott, where I currently live, than when I was born. So you do this for all your planets, and then you can see everything. Okay? I'm going to do another video where I'm going to do an example where you can see more of these calculations getting worked out, just so to make sure it's not confusing. But this is it. It's just that simple of a technique. You just take multiples of the planet's declination and see where those multiples fall on the globe. And if they fall on a city whose latitude is very close to one of those multiples, that planet is going to be prominently activated. And the more planets that you like in your chart that you can get activated in any particular city, the more fun and the more you're going to like that city, the more it's going to suit what you like. And when you're in a period of your good destiny, it's such a city that you'll move to. However, when you're in a period where you're not going to get something in your life that you really want, you'll find yourself moving to a city where there's just no, where your planet is really far away from being lit up by the latitude of the city. And so you don't hardly get any of that planet in your life. Okay? So it's a really simple, effective technique. You have to spend a little time working out the math, but once you have the math, you're good to go. And I'm going to do a full example for the math on another video for those of you who want to watch all the math and get that help. Other people, I already did enough math and you'll know exactly what to do from now on. But some people, struggle with math a little bit. So I'm going to give some more examples. And in those examples, I'll probably try to tell some good stories too, so it's not totally just boring.